interest rates, they have gone up. They've gone up 25 basis points here in Australia. Was it like 50 basis points in the States or something? So it's gone in Australia from like 0.1%, if people don't know what a basis point is, to 0.35%. So variable rates are bouncing around 3.17% from 2.92. What does that mean? Like, I look at this and I go, okay, cool. Is this just that the mortgage is more expensive now?
Yeah, it's such a fascinating topic, and even the way you expressed it then, it's like quite a technical topic, and I think a lot of business owners particularly don't necessarily understand how it can affect them in many, many areas of life, many, many areas of life. Now, I will mention this, probably the most noticeable one is that by this rate change by the RBA is that everyone's mortgages are going to get more expensive. Yep. So if you have a mortgage or you're investing in property, or even you just have general other car loans and things like that, you are going to, or anything on a variable interest rate, I should say, you're going to notice an increased cost in that. Now, I just want to make this a little bit more real. I'm just going to be reading from the screen for a second. But the way to think about it is that if you have $1 million in debt, I'm talking $1 million, which is a substantial amount, is what that's actually going to cost you is an extra $30.80 per week. Like, that's the impact of this change.
So bouncing that across a year, I'm doing some quick maths, that's an extra $1,500 in a year. So the thing that always fascinates me with these interest rate increases, because you've got credit card debt, you've got overdraft accounts potentially in your business, you've got all, to your point, you've got car finance, you've got the mortgage, you've got all of these things that are backed off debt. So when we say that it's gone up by 0.25% or 25 basis points, does that mean all of that debt is now going to increase? So if I use overdraft or any other form of interest or any debt in my businesses, it's also going to increase 0.25%?
Absolutely, and even more than that, right? So let's just kind of unpack this one a little bit and why I feel like Australian business owners need to be paying attention to this. Right. So first off, it's not just mortgages. We've said that. It's going to be other ways of debt. All debt will be more expensive. The second thing, though, is like this psychological factor. So like maybe some of your potential customers or leads were getting ready to make a purchase from you, but now this interest rate rise has been, brought in, and then it's in the news. Now they're like, oh, the cost of my house is going up. So they start delaying making these purchases, or they tighten the belt. They become a little bit more frugal. And that's the common effect. And I won't be lying if, like, I've had that thought myself. Like, I have a lot of debt, right? When interest rates go up 1%, it's not a small amount that I am now having to pay. So I'm like, oh, got to really think about my spending. Now, even though I know better than to be emotionally reacting to the news, it's like it all hits us in a way. And I'll ask you, when interest rates went up, Grant, what was your, like, emotional trigger?
The emotional trigger was like, nah, you can't do this to me. This is outrageous. Like, I know the exact profitability of all of the debt that I've currently got now. So then the immediate reaction that I did, I jumped into my tracker. And I'm like, well, what happens if this isn't a 0.25% increase? What happens if this is a 1% increase? Like, do any of my positions change? Do I have any of my sort of things that I care about, like my profit and loss? Is that really, really impacted? And of course it is to an extent. But then I always think about, well, okay, what's the secondary consequence? Like, what's the second step that happens from here? Which is, okay, well, things then become a little bit more expensive to pay for them, right? Which means, okay, well, now people buying houses, the debt becomes more expensive, which means that rents are probably going to go up, right? Because now it's all of these things kind of compound into itself. And I looked at that and I'm like, great, all my positions are still profitable, even if it does increase more. So then my emotions went from screw the world, oh my God, this is all over, to, hey, you guys, playing a game, no worries at all. I'm in a pretty good spot where I'm at. What about you? What was yours?
So you just gave a very, like, logical response, right? But so you've gone, you've had this reaction, and then you've gone to find data to, like, or how justified is my emotional response?
Exactly.
Do you think that is what the 27 million Australians also did? No. So, right, you've got these groups of people. Now, some people are paying no attention, right? So they're just going to keep living their lives as they are. But if you're someone who has a mortgage and, like, the news is just pumping out these rate rises and you're hearing all these things, like, that affects sentiment and that affects how people buy in a really, really big way. I was a very, very similar response to you, just as an FYI. Like, I really looked at it. But don't you find it interesting that both of us went straight to 1%? Yeah. The rate didn't go up 1%, but we were like, ooh, well, if it went to 1%, like, what could it be? Like, how does this – we've already started building defenses for 4 rate rises even though one has already happened, and that this is like sentiment and psychology. Now, this also comes through in another way. So that's just the second one. So this is like consumers. But the next one that comes into this is like actual business expansion.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you're you've got a business right now, you were thinking about, hey, I'm just about to hire that next person. Rates have gone up and you're like, whoa, I'm becoming a bit more uncertain about, like, I've got debt on the building I'm in, or we've got car loans to pay, or we've got overdraft. Can we really afford this next person now, or should we wait a little bit longer before we expand or invest in that next factory or whatever it is? And then that in itself changes the sentiment in those markets as well.
Yeah, and from obviously the software world where I come from, we'll use things like a convertible note where we'll go and borrow $100,000 from somebody and we pay interest on that over 3 years, and then it either converts into equity, we pay it off, etc. And so it's really interesting. They are increasing, and they actually have already increased, which was actually a little bit of a leading view for me, right? So I've looked at it at convertible notes that used to be about 12%, so it was about 1% per month, so 12% for an entire year. And then on that is now up to about 14%. But the other interesting thing from a consumer perspective, just to close that out, when I was looking at home loans on variable rates for a new property that I was purchasing, it was already factored in. Like, and rate increases hadn't been locked in stone yet. Like, the banks had already passed this on. So even if you were getting convertible notes, like we were looking at some, I was like, yeah, like these things were already baked in. The leading indicators were there that this was happening. It's just now Australia and Australian business owners are kind of reacting to something that the writing was already on the wall like weeks and months ago, where everyone else knew. Like, completely.
But isn't it fascinating that the trigger of interest rates rising is the one that gets the reaction, so to speak?
Yep.
And what a difficult time to be raising capital. I tell you what, is I think last few years, if you're a startup getting it, you had it while it was easy. And if you were trying to raise now when the markets are a little bit more nervous, it would be difficult. But I almost want to reshape this now, because I've just basically painted a picture of the negative. Can I put some positive onto this?
No, we're going to the next topic. No, of course you can.
Right. So like the whole reason, let's think about why they cut rates in the first place. Okay, so why did interest rates go from like, I think it was like 1% or something, they cut them down to like practically zero across the world?
Because they wanted to increase spending. Right?
Yeah, the world was damaged. I was going to drop an F-bomb, but it's like a pandemic hit, and they were like, crap, we better do something to stimulate the economy. Like, the economy was actually—
money.
Yeah, but things were bad. So things bad equals cutting rates. Things good equals rising rates. Yep. But it's funny how it has this inverse reaction, right? So it's actually, and this is what I really hope people take from this, is if reserve banks or federal banks across the world are now, I think it's central banks is the general term,
yep.
Are raising interest rates, that actually means that the economy is good. That actually means that there's signs of things going so well that things are getting out of hand, and we've got to like put the brakes on before it goes too far. So as a business owner, it's very, very easy to go, oh, look, rates are rising. I need to be really concerned and worried. But it's actually kind of a little bit of the opposite as well. Yes, I wholeheartedly believe you need to make sure you've got appropriate risk measures in place, and playing with debt in different interest rate environments is huge. But it's actually a sign that there's a lot of positivity. We're through whatever has happened in the last few years.
And it's interesting you say that, because before I actually riff on this, I'm going to ask you another question, which is factoring all of this in, looking at what's going on in just Australia. Like, are you concerned at all around the greater impact of like the global markets on that?
I've got a property settling in 4 days. Rather than I'm just going to put my money where my mouth is and say, like, I am extremely optimistic with the future overall. Will there be some bumps up and down along the way? Totally. Do you need to have some risk measures in place and appropriate buffers? But I'm not dooming and glooming or like the world is over in any way, shape or form. Are you?
No, I settled on one in like 4 weeks. So no, like what? There was never a great time to buy. Like it is this. It's interesting when you look at investments. It's always the time horizon that you look at it on. So if you look at like interest rates increasing and you look at like, oh, well, over the last 3 months, it's different. Like property is not increasing as much as it once was, and all the like, there's not as many buying factors and all these things. And you're just like, oh, damn, it's not that good to buy. However, if you expand that out, it's like it's the greatest time to buy ever.
Can I let me add something to that, and I would love your opinion on this, Grant. I really would. It's like, I think there's on certain things, it is a dumb and terrible idea to buy them right now. It's like, but do you know what? That same sentence is true every day. Every day. Right. So even when like you think it's perfect conditions, there's probably some assets or things that are a terrible time to buy. Yep. So it's like, if I look at this right now, is like, there's been a lot of businesses that have thrived in the last couple of years because people have been stuck home. Is it a great time to buy them? Probably not. That's they've had their run. So it's like, but on the reverse of that is like, there's probably, and I know there will be, phenomenal opportunities across the world in a huge variety of ways where it's like, it's the perfect time right now. We may or may not know about them or even be aware of them, but I generally feel that it's such a dumb question to be like, is now the right time to buy or not to buy, a right to invest or not to invest? I'm like, in what? Like, it's so like specific. Like might be the best time ever to invest in crypto. I don't know. Yeah. Might be the worst. But at different times, those things and horizons, like, do you need the money tomorrow? Or are you trying to make a return overnight? Or is this like for the next 30 years? Because like totally different.
And I always like the charts that look at, if you were just to invest an amount of money every single month for a long period of time, it always outperforms the speculation of, is this the bottom and am I going to buy in here versus I'm trying to buy at the top. And it's just a long game that no matter where it kind of sits, if you just keep chipping away, the progress is there.
Man, if Warren Buffett can't pick the market timings, I think the rest of the world really needs to get off that. Anyone who thinks they can time the market, I'm like, come on.
Hey, fellow business owner, if this topic and value-packed short video has resonated with you at all, and you want to dive deeper into being a full stack business owner, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now.